You're listening to Almost Beach Glass Interviews. I'm Gil. I'm really interested in the creative process. Today, my guest is...
Bradley James Lockhart, a vocalist of the band Dryland of Bellingham, Washington.
What is your advice for aspiring artists?
My advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I suppose if you're aspiring, you're kind of just getting started, right? And I suppose while you can, make as many things for you as possible. Because once you become a professional artist, a lot of your work is commissioned and is kind of like... You become kind of like a carpenter, you know. You become like a blue collar employee that does a job, does a service. So while you're figuring out your style, like literally just make all of the crazy shit that you want to make, like all the weird ideas, get them out, because that will inform like your whole future,
Okay.
what you decide to make for you.
So really quickly before hopping into that, I think it's important that the listeners know that I know you from two different arenas. One is the graphic design world, and the other one is the music world.
Yes.
When you're talking about commissions, does that apply to music too, or is...
Yeah, I would say it does. I mean, a lot of the most successful musicians I know are producers and they're songwriters for other people.
Okay.
So really, you know, it's very rare in any creative career that you get to basically just do your own work exclusively forever. You know, eventually your skills get kind of projected out into the atmosphere, and people see it and cling to it. And yeah, maybe they'll buy a copy of your record. Maybe they'll order a print from you, and you'll make a couple bucks. But eventually, somebody will come around and be like, "I want you to do what you did for yourself, but for me, and I'm going to pay you $10,000."
That's a trip. So what I just heard is that you create as an artist for you, and you get that muscle memory down, and then at a point you get so good at it or so you at it that other people want to pay you for you to lend your skill set to their project.
Yeah, and like because they can trust you, they see what you've done, and they know that they're not going to be throwing their money in a dumpster. They're like they created this animated video or they produced this amazing record, so they have the skills and the discipline to do it. Well, I need to commission them, you know, to either collaborate or just to create something exclusively for them, you know, and yeah.
So is that something that kind of happens authentically over time, or is this something that you have kind of honed your creativity and intellect to kind of foster?
I mean, it's a different, you know, journey for everybody, but I like to think about, you know, Jim Henson is one of my creative idols of all time, and he made like coffee commercials, you know, for a long time. So, and even the most famous artists, like, you know, Salvador Dali designed a lollipop logo even when he was like in his 60s. And it's like, it's not always everybody's motivation. Like, I am going to become an artist so that I can make stuff that other people, so I can fulfill other people's visions.
Who was that first guy that you mentioned?
Jim Henson?
Yeah.
Oh, he's the creator of the Muppets.
Okay.
And Sesame Street.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I mean, he's like the most famous puppeteer of all time, I guess.
Okay.
But also movie director. The Labyrinth.
Yes, David Bowie.
Yes, David Bowie was the star. Jim Henson was the creator.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the Muppet Show.
Just a big picture creative brain.
Oh yeah, I mean, I mean, Jim Henson is up there with Walt Disney. I mean, it's like he, created worlds and universes and characters and voiced the characters, designed the characters, built the puppets, puppeteered the puppets, directed the movies that won Academy Awards. I mean, it's like just all encompassing, giant juggernaut of creativity, and like he still made coffee commercials, and like so, and a lot of times that's how you get your career off the ground when you get to that level. But a lot of the most successful, famous people that I know still do commission work because it's just a reliable source of income.
So pulling background after a couple brief tangents, that you were saying the thing for artists to do is create primarily for themselves
when they're getting rolling.
When they're getting rolling, okay. Mm-hmm. How does one stay consistent in that practice when the more social one becomes? There's going to be more opportunities, but also more potential options to deviate past one's goals.
Yeah, it can be really tough. I mean, it's all about kind of like time management too, like giving yourself X amount of hours per week where you're going to dedicate it to a passion project, and not just like completely. You don't want to overload and burn out yourself and your brain and your creative fingertips.
I see that over and over and over again.
Yeah, and then you're like, screw this, I'm just gonna go become a janitor. Like, like there will be no pressure on me as long as the floors are swept and the toilets are cleaned. Like, but yeah, it's all about just moderation. And for me, like playing music is like every Wednesday I'm here in this building practicing, and there's no motivation other than really just the joy of the act of doing it.
And how many years have you guys been in this building practicing?
So this band has been together for 9 years, and I think we've almost practiced here the entire time, pretty close to it. But I want to say 14, 15 years ago, I had another band that started practicing here. We were the first band to practice in this building when we modified our room to some soundproofing.
And we're at the Makeshift in Bellingham, Washington.
Makeshift art space.
I've actually seen you guys play here.
Dryland?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw you guys, I want to say like 6+ months ago. It was winter. Okay, it had been like a year ago because it was winter when I saw you guys.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We played a show with some bands from Seattle or something, I think, probably.
I remember that you had some playful stage antics.
I always do that, yeah. It's improvisational, but yeah.
I think there was one point that you were dangling the microphone above your face, almost kind of like a donut on the string, old-timey birthday game.
Oh, okay. Cool, yeah.
And then there's another point where you were like, I want to say trying to tickle the guitarist's armpits, and he was like trying to run away from you a little bit.
Yeah.
But like he was kind of in the corner and really couldn't get away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's constant. Just like I said, it's improv, but my players in my band, they know what's coming. I mean, they know that like half of my motivation is being on stage is just to fuck with them.
So how did you set this tone and get everyone behind it together?
I mean, I don't really know if it was ever even like a verbal agreement or anything. I think pretty early on, I've been a frontman for 20 years, and throughout the years I've broken my leg on stage. I've done a lot of damage.
How did you break your leg?
In Missoula, Montana, I was in a band called Black Eyes and Neckties, and we were playing a festival called Total Fest, and it was indoor. It was an indoor venue, and we were like on the second stage, and it was the end of the show, and there were these weird ledges above the stage that looked like they were like flat on top, and they were probably about as tall as the ceiling in here, so like 10 feet tall. So I like jumped from the couch onto the ledge and like pulled myself up. And I was like, this rules. Yeah, this is going to be so epic. And as soon as I got up there, the ledge snapped underneath me.
Oh, God.
So I was like, okay, if I fall straight down, there was like all these photographers and people on the side. I was like, I'm probably going to crush somebody. So instead, I like flung myself like forward and landed, probably another 10, 15 feet away from the ledge. And I twisted my ankle so bad that I got a spiral fracture in my fibia or tibia, one of the two of those, and it just snapped.
Gnarly.
But it was the end of the set, so I just kind of was like, just agonizingly talking to the mic, and then But we went on tour for another like 2 weeks after that. So I was just sitting in a chair the whole tour.
Probably the only time anyone's ever stage dove, missed the people, and said, "Good,
Yeah,
glad."
no, definitely wasn't a stage dive. I mean, I'm 2,500 pounds, so I don't like bestow that on anybody. I'm not gonna crush anyone to death at a
Where's
show.
Johnny?
It's
swear
better
he was here.
better to snap an ankle than to snap a stranger's neck.
Yeah,
so.
there we go. Oh my god. So this is just authentically you. It's not a character.
Yeah, it's not like I remember we played in Olympia a couple years ago, and someone was like, how do you guys like choreograph what Brad does on stage?" And they're like, "We do not choreograph it." Because at one point I like picked up my guitar player on my shoulders, and so he was like on my shoulders playing, and I was like holding him. And I try not to hurt anybody else in the band. I definitely hurt myself more than anyone, but it's just kind of weird improv. I mean, we kind of fall into a little bit of that like noise rock genre of bands like Jesus Lizard, which there is kind of a history of like shock rock there,
Okay.
like ripping off your shirt, and like a lot of those guys get naked, which I don't do. I don't get naked
Do you
on
guys
stage.
have-
I have gotten naked on stage, but not in this band.
Do you have a line?
Do we have a line?
Like what's like because let's say you need a new guitarist, and it's like, all right, buddy, we have some pretty interesting standards.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like we like to say we're Dryland family band because we've all known each other and played together for decades. So I mean, I guess maybe eventually we'd get a new guitar player.
So the rapport is what's made that playfulness.
It's all built in. It's all like it's like when you would fight with your brother and sister or whatever. It's like that kind of affectionate.
So you'd pretend it hurts before it actually hurts, kind of thing.
Pretty much.
So
Absolutely.
the playfulness is communicative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Hell
Yeah. Yeah, and they definitely get frustrated with me if it's like a really important part and I'm like sticking my face on their strings. Because then they're just like, "Would you just not do that next time?" I'm like, "Okay, I'll like stick my face on your strings at a different part."
Yeah, there you go.
So I'm not like a total monster. Like I'll listen to feedback, but yeah.
So how did you guys all get together and stick together over these years?
Yeah, I mean, sticking together, that's the hard part. Getting together was easy. Our guitar player, Clapper is his name. He started writing these songs in about 2014, and he went to Holly, our bass player, who owns the Shakedown here in Bellingham, heavy metal venue, rock venue. She hadn't played in a band in years, and he's like, "I've been writing these songs. They're kind of like mid-tempo, chuggy metal songs." And she's like, "I love that kind of music. Like, I'll play bass for you." So the two of them got together, and then our other guitar player, Ryan Greer's little brother, played drums initially. And then I think I might have been the third or fourth person for them to ask to come on board.
Interesting.
Clapper, the initial songwriter guy, and I met in like second grade playing soccer together and baseball and skateboarding. And when I was 13, I got an electric guitar, and when he was 13, he got an electric bass for Christmas.
Oh, there we go.
So we just like instantly started our first band,
Nice.
like just attempting to play Pennywise covers in his garage.
Just bro him over and over
Oh
again.
yeah. Do 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 do. It's like the first song most people learned in 1998. But and then we formed a band a few years later. We met Ryan Greer, the other guitar player, a few years later, and like so that was like 2099, and we've all been in multiple bands with each other over the years. But we'll take like 2-3 years off, maybe play with some other people. Then all of a sudden we have some new genre, new style we're playing, and maybe we try out with somebody else, but we're like, well, Clapper knows my DNA. Like Ryan knows my DNA. He knows the notes that I'm going to play before I play them.
So what I'm hearing is it sounds like that level of acceptance that your band practices while you're doing your frontman thing, that you practice and that they all respectively practice that same patience in a bigger picture context by doing different projects and not needing it to go a certain way on a certain schedule or something. Is that kind of on point?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's like we all, I love folk and country music. I'm obsessed with Townes Van Zandt and John Prine and people like that. And so I do like, a lot of times I'll do my own solo shows where I'm doing just like finger picking, Travis picking country folk stuff. And there's members of the band that just hate that music. Like they would never, ever have anything to do with it. Meanwhile, everybody has their own different tastes. And like Clapper is currently in a band called Fog Bodies that's really more like kind of art rock that like I couldn't picture like Aaron, our drummer, would never be in a band like that because he just loves fills and he loves, being more sporadic. And so we all have these, desires and styles that we like to flex on our own. But then ultimately we are all kind of united by our also passion of stoner rock and doom metal and noise rock and hardcore punk. And that's kind of where we all kind of fit together in this band.
And it's cool to see you guys fit so well together and also be so diverse at the same time. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
For sure.
I think it would be a nice segue when you start to talk about country a little bit, to talk about graphic design. Mm-hmm. For our listeners, do you want to give a little background of what you do in the tangible art world?
Totally. Yeah, so I have kind of like a few jobs, I guess, in my field of visual art, design, and animation. I've been freelancing for about 7 years, and I have a little shop that I call Lariat, Lariat Creative, and that's just kind of like the umbrella for everything I do that's commissioned. Like we began speaking about, commissioned work. So logos, animations, a lot of illustration, things like that. And then over the years, I started designing more like merchandise-based stuff. So like on the subject of country, I did a series of patches inspired by my favorite country songs. So like Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys.
They're really, really cool patches.
If I Could Only Fly. And like some more abstract songs, but then also some mainstream songs. And I did that as like a series, just like for one like art show, where I made like signs of the designs, just kind of celebrating the lyrics. But since then, I've kind of turned that into like a little business. Like I have an Etsy shop that sells, dozens of patches a week, I would say. And now I've been selling wholesale to people in Texas by the hundreds. So it's kind of become this weird little side shot of my career, of my design career.
How did that snowball from being a dude who's good at graphics and who's in touch with what people would like to see?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, I think it was, going back to what I first said at the beginning, like, I just wanted to create a piece of art that celebrated the world of the song. Like, I didn't want to celebrate the artist, because especially in country, like, every album cover is just a photo of their face.
Also, on the legality side, we were talking a couple weeks ago, and you explained to me the nuance of it was interesting. It sounded like a combination of some analytical thoughts with a little bit of creativity loophole going on.
Yeah.
Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, well, when I first started making these patches, I was like, am I going to get sued by Dolly Parton? Dolly Parton's brand is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and I imagine she has teams of lawyers that exist out there just to protect her copyright. Yeah, just to protect her brand. So like from the get-go, I'm like, I'm not going to put anybody's name. I'm not going to put anybody's logo. I'm not going to put anybody's face. Like, I don't want people to think this is knockoff George Jones art. I want them to be like, oh, this is a guy who was inspired by the lyrics and the title of a song to create a piece of art dedicated to that song. And that's totally legal. And no one trademarks or copyrights lyrics because they're kind of more considered public property.
And I think it was earlier in the conversation you're saying, like, you want to show the listener like the world of their song. Mm-hmm. And I like that wording in the sense that you're not showing them a representation of the song. You're showing them something that you have created yourself from being so enveloped by the song and the art.
It's like a snapshot of it's like, we all hear the song, but can you see it? Like, can you see what it would look like if it were a physical object? And so like that's kind of what I go for. And like the lyrics are the hero. The singer and the songwriter isn't the hero. The words are the hero.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah. And I've learned that kind of over the years, but designing those was purely motivated by me wanting them to exist. Nobody hired me to do it. I didn't know if I would sell any. Yeah. I did it because I wanted a Towns Van Zandt patch and I could only find like one on Etsy and it wasn't very good. Cool. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to make one of those. And I'm like, well, shit, if I'm going to make one of those, I might as well make a dozen more. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to make a dozen more, I might as well have an art show. If I have an art show, I might as well order these patches as patches. Cool. And then I've got a couple hundred patches left over. If I've got patches, I might as well throw them on Etsy. And the Etsy just absolutely crushes because people go on Etsy just to shop for stuff. It's like going to a store, but online. And so I don't do any social media. I don't do any advertising. I don't do any marketing. People just find them naturally and buy them.
This sounds really similar to how philosophy works in the world of academia, of that like someone will, read a little Life is Like This from 100 years ago. They'll think about it and go, yeah, let me take that conversation and the part that resonates with me and keep that front and center, and the rest can kind of,
write like a whole new piece based on that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of a big part of my creative process too, honestly, is like taking little clips and little snippets and little thoughts from other writers over time, and then building my own world based off that. Like a lot of times, like on these records, these songs, like for Dryland in particular, I'll just hear a line spoken, and then I'll write it down, and then I'll revisit it weeks, months later, and be like, the original author maybe intended something completely different, but I'm going to take it, and I sometimes call it intentionally misinterpreting mythology, because I do it with religion a lot. Like I'll read about something from the Old Testament or whatever, and I'm like not a particularly religious guy, but maybe just like I just appreciate the prose. I think it's like a eloquently spoken line, and then I'll just write my own story based off of it.
Dude, I think that's kind of like, I feel like religion at the end of the day is kind of like a literary Rorschach test.
Yeah.
You can just...
What do you see?
Yeah, because there are nuns that Bible, battle each other and go, actually, thou shall this, or, whatever.
I'm like, dude, I just think it sounds tight.
Yeah.
I'm just going to reimagine it as like a wizard smoking dope. And he says it to like a toad, and then they go on an adventure together. Or
Satan and balls of fire. Like, come on.
Yeah.
That's pretty badass.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I guess tying all these things together, it seems that there's an element of playfulness and not taking things too seriously and making things for you. Seems to be a reoccurring theme.
Absolutely.
Being a fellow multimedia creative person, how do you stay centric with seeing your creations through to fruition?
Oh, man. That's a good question, because they don't always get there, The ones that I care about tend to keep me up at night. Like sometimes they're like the last thing I think about before I fall asleep, And a lot of times they kind of haunt me like fucking ghosts. Like I can see a scene that I know I need to make, and I can see it, and I just haven't made it yet, and it just plays in my head. Like I animated a music video for Dryland a couple of years ago, and it took 200 hours. And there were so many shots in that were in my head for like 2 years, and I just had to get them out. So, and life gets in the way, jobs, careers, relationships, families, can all kind of take precedent. But if it's something that like legitimately haunts you, like keeps you up at night, like you have to make it. Otherwise, it's never going to go away.
I do hear what you're saying, and there are moments where it's reoccurring through weeks to months where I'm like, oh, but what if I just made that thing?
Yeah,
like what
totally.
if, so that is very present in my mind. But something that is also present in my mind is a million projects that I half-ass want to finish, and I don't go and finish them. And at least for me, I find that kind of leads to a headspace of maybe draining my current creative volition, I guess. Do you have any words of wisdom to that point?
Yeah, a trick that I use is you don't tell anybody about it. So if you have a really cool idea, and you may have even started it, you may have gotten pretty far through it.
Yeah.
But if it's not done, like you just end up jinxing it. If you talk about it too much, or if you show early stages of it to people. Like I found I've jinxed myself on things because I put the cart before the horse. Like you start patting yourself on the back for something that you haven't even fucking done yet. Like it's just like, I've got this cool idea, I'm gonna make this thing, and then it's just like, and then you show it to someone and they're like, oh yeah, that's, or you tell somebody about it and like, oh, that's a cool idea, and then you just get that little spark of gratification, like, but like you haven't actually done it yet.
Yeah.
So like for me, it's like, just keep tight-lipped about things like that for as long as possible.
Speaking to that point, I feel like also when you tell someone about something that hasn't been done yet, you've solidified a lot of creative potential that you kind of just were like, and it's going to be like this. And then you might get a better idea in the moment, but now you're stuck on a conversation with, Thomas from a week ago or whatever, and wanting to, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So,
And I say that as someone who does spill the beans too, like, but I just know that like some of my most satisfying projects, I just kind of drop on people and then they're like, whoa, like where did that come from? And then you're like, dude, I've been working on it for 2 years and I finally finished it,
so when it's a process, so it definitely makes sense in that our days kind of setup where it's like, I got to do it, let's create it. But for those longer year and a half, 2 year projects, how do you stay tight-lipped? How do you stay consistent and not dream it bigger than you actually can, or dream it into the definition that it's actually meant to be?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. Like,
And I solely ask because you do it well.
yeah, totally. Oh God. I think something that's helpful for me too is that I have collaborators. Like with
Yeah.
Dryland, it's a band. We're a band. It's not just me. It's Clapper, it's Holly, it's Aaron, it's Ryan. Like, so we get to celebrate each other while we work on Weekend in the Swamp. Our new record, and then it comes out. With the merch, I've got my buddy Kevin, and we came up with a board game together and we worked on it and we prototyped it. And then, so we got to bounce ideas off each other the whole time. And then we got to make it public. There are a few projects that, I've done completely by myself, like animated videos and things like that. But I'm a teacher too. So at Western and I share my work with my students.
What do you teach at Western?
I teach animation and graphic design.
Oh, cool. Right on.
So like, last night, I taught a class on animating in 3D space, animating a camera, and I'm like, I'm going to show you guys this art that I made that's not public yet, and then like, check it out. It's got a fish, it's got a bear, it's got a Sasquatch, it's got an orca. Let's break it down and play with it. So, I guess the moral there is that like, you find other creative people to get in, to bring in early, because maybe they've got some cool ideas, and then you're not just on your own. But then that also satisfies that itch of, it's not just me by myself in a dark basement, twiddling my thumbs and animating away every day or whatever.
What you said makes a lot of sense. I see a greater parallel. I'm going to try to paint it. I might totally botch it. So there's like this strange juxtaposition of creating things for yourself, but also leaning into the support of creative ambiguity of others, going back to you and your band members having different side projects that allows you to not have the projects brunt, or like let the projects have a heavy weight to them, and to more of lean into the support of the relationships around those projects.
Yeah, definitely.
So it seems that
I think the relationship around Dryland is the number one motivation. Like,
cool.
I think that, yeah, we've hopefully sell enough records to break even. We hopefully have enough people at the show to pay for the gas to get to the show. But really, like, being with each other is the motivation. Like, spending time together, making music that we like together is the motivation. And then also meeting other people. Like, we're playing in Wenatchee this weekend. We're playing with a band in high school that's like 15, and then we're playing with a band that's like in their 50s. And it's like, we're the middle band. And it's like, we're going to get to meet these people who we don't know, who we're going to create our art with in a town we've never been, at least not as a band, And it's like, you don't have that many opportunities in life to just be handed like, here's a new friendship. Like, here's a like-minded person. Maybe they're old, maybe they're young, but, you can learn from them.
So I think, okay, hearing that has helped me boil it down to a single point. That the relationships, I just had it, and then my screen went dark and some bullshit. It was so good too. Give me a second, I'll remember it.
No worries.
Okay, came back to me.
Yep.
In short, it sounds like you and your band prioritize what's going to repeat, what's going to happen, like what's going to be the most consistent experience, and have the emphasis of the experience be on that part. And that seems to keep you guys in the present.
But inconsistency is also a motivator, because just like me being, improvisational on stage, you never know what's going to happen in the moment. We like to say yes to weird shows. Like our bass player Holly in our last interview was like, she's like, I am motivated by playing weird shows. Like we've played in a cave, we play in the woods of Alger, we've played in a restaurant. She's like, the weirder the show, the better. So like,
Cool.
Part of it isn't consistency. I've always been someone who subscribes to consistent inconsistency.
Tell me about it, because I'd like to learn that one.
That was like a first theory of our first record. Is it's like something that's like unpredictable, but like charming at the same time. So I guess like me on stage is an example, and just like intentionally having things be awkward and weird and a little off and like a little cringy, but like celebrating them and having fun with them, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah.
So celebrating some of the rough, like, have you ever heard of the 80-20 rule?
I'm not sure.
It's like, it was like 20% of the time that goes into like finishing a project, you will get it to 80% productivity done in that time, and then that last 20% of making it perfect, that will take 80% of your time.
Oh, interesting. Oh, wow. Yeah,
And
I haven't heard that.
I kind of see that you guys celebrate that 20% that might not be fully polished.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
everyone loves it because it's real.
Exactly. And like, live, like, the band never plays the songs exactly right,
Yeah.
Like there's always a part that's fucked up, but like that's what makes it fun, like that's what makes you want to see it rather than just listen to it.
Even in the tonality, like there's something twisted about maybe like the hat might be, or the snare might be too tight, or
or
the
I've
guitar
spit beer on the drums. Like our last show, I spit like an entire beer all over the drums, and Aaron was hitting the drums, and there was just beer flying off the cymbals every time he hit them, and it's just like, I probably won't do that every show because he'll get fucking pissed. But that night, it really worked and was really
You'll
funny.
do it inconsistently.
I mean, exactly, consistently inconsistent. Like I'll never sing exactly the same way, but the way that I play with the words and the way that I play with the melodies will be reoccurring. So it'll be that consistent inconsistency.
Okay. So for some takeaways, consistent inconsistency in the sense of practicing acceptance of where your efforts take you right in this moment, and to not try to dial it in to where it's taking you out of that like fun headspace.
Yeah. Don't strive for perfection. Just enjoy the moment, I guess.
And then the first main takeaway was do it for you.
Right.
And
I mean, eventually other people will gravitate towards it,
Okay.
Yeah, because they'll see that it's honest and real and authentic.
And okay, so that is the last question that I have, is that when you are practicing being authentic in group situations, working that bone, and also working to create things for you, a natural opportunity that's going to present itself is commission work, regardless of the medium. How do you keep those passion-filled headspaces with you when you're on someone else's dollar?
How do you keep the passion while you're doing commission?
Yeah, because that's kept me away from commission work.
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, a lot of the times for me, like I said, graphic design in particular is like kind of blue collar work. Like I consider it a vocation. Like it could be taught at a technical college because you learn the tools, you learn the techniques, and then someone needs to get the job done. And so I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Like, a plumber has to put in the pipes correctly so your house doesn't flood. And like an artist has to create the vector file correctly so that the logo can be used for the next 20 years. And so I guess there's a certain amount of like autopilot that goes into creating commissioned custom creative work. And I think that's okay. It's just becoming a master of your craft.
Yeah.
But for me, I think the opportunities, like the way to keep being creative and to keep being motivated outside of those commission projects is to just challenge yourself with new things.
Okay.
Like for me, a couple of years ago, it was animation because like I graduated, I got a job in graphic design. I was doing the same graphic design over and over and over again. And then I was like, I needed to animate a music video for my old band. And I was like, I'm just going to relearn animation. Like I'm just going to start over and do it. And within 3-4 years, I had a full-time job in animation,
Cool.
and so then when animation became the focus, then I'm like, well, maybe I should work on metal more, and so like you can kind of piggyback these passion projects into these careers and then just try and think about like, what's the next thing I can do and how can I combine as many as possible? And like, so for me, that's like animated film. Because animated film is illustration, it's animation, it's music, it's acting. Like it's like every creative thing I've ever done in my life kind of come together. And so like that's my next big goal, right?
One thing I heard you say that almost sounded mildly taboo to me, but thinking on it, I agree with, is about the analytical skills that go into a creative discipline like graphic design. It is like a trade. I agree with that. And I think I get caught up in that headspace of like, oh, this is hard. That it's something that if it's that hard but it's needed, then I should do exactly what you said and get it done tight enough until it can be muscle memory.
Right.
And just own that analytical part and then search for new analytical disciplines to keep that creativity alive.
It's just one more tool in your tool belt, It's like it's one more thing that you can feel confident and comfortable doing.
Yeah.
That can just help perpetuate your whole career or your whole life.
Yeah. And that makes sense from all the different disciplines that you do. Yeah. Dude, hell yeah. I really appreciate giving us some really cool takeaways and for spending time chit-chatting about music and creativity. And what does Dryland have next? You guys just released this new album.
Yeah, so it's like a week old at this point. New record, Weekend in the Swamp, it is called, which is from The Muppet Show, by the way, tying it back to Jim Henson, the John Denver episode of The Muppet Show. I was like, that's a funny line. I'm going to create a whole record inspired by that. But yeah, so we just played our record release show. We just funded a Kickstarter, so we got a mail out. We got a bunch of vinyl. We're playing this weekend in Wenatchee, and then we're playing, I believe, in Portland at the end of the month. And then I think we're going to do some cool collabs. I think we're going to have like a collab with a Tacoma brewery who's going to make like a beer that's inspired by our record. And then hopefully we're going to...
Is that going to get canned?
I think it's going to be a tall can, yeah. Hopefully that all comes together, and then hopefully play more basically like regional shows. We typically play like Bellingham, Seattle, Everett, Tacoma, Portland. Just kind of go back and forth. And, whenever you put out a record, it's like you kind of come down from the release and you're like, well, what now?
Yeah.
And I guess the hope is like, well, people will like the record and they'll invite us to play, their weird bar mitzvah or whatever. And then we're like, cool, now we can get some more weird shows.
Cool.
Yeah. So hopefully we get some weird shows.
Hopefully I can
book
see
us.
One of those shows coming up, and hopefully I can have a Dryland tall boy in my hand.
Oh, hell yeah. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Let's hope so.
I just want to say thanks so much for coming on, and I found your perspective very fruitful, and I want to say thank you again.
Thank you, Gil. I appreciate your intellectual analysis.
Hell yeah. Hey, thanks so much, Brad.
Thank you.